Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Fragrantica Talks. I am joined today with my colleagues Adam and Nicola, and today we're going to be discussing summer fragrances that do not feature citrus. And this is an interesting topic because I think for many of us, summer and warm weather fragrances often feature citrus. What we were just talking about off camera before we came on camera was that for a few of us on this recording, this was a very easy thing with which to easy topic with which to pick selections, and for one of us it was not. I open up the floor for one of you to talk about that. Why don't we start with you, Nicola?
So I'm the person who found this really hard. I think mostly because pretty much everything has some form of citrus in, bergamot quite often being the main, culprit. So one of my choices, I have allowed a little sneaky citrus in there, but I think it qualifies still because it's not a citrus fragrance. And I kept thinking of things and going, oh yeah, that's a really good summer fragrance. And then I'd be like, oh, hang on a minute, it's got lemon in it. Oh, what about that one? Oh, no, that one's got bergamot in. What about that one? Oh, that one's got pink grapefruit in. And so everything I thought of, and everything that was in my cupboard as a sort of summer staple has some form of citrus in. So I found it really, really difficult. I got there in the end, and I'm really pleased with the fragrances I was able to pick. And there are some, top tier level fragrances here. But yeah, it was a little bit of a process for sure.
Nice. Now, Adam, this apparently was easier for you. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Oh yeah. Oh my goodness. Okay. I am buzzing with excitement over this episode. I just kept on seeing things in both of my collection of fragrances, my collection of samples of fragrances, and just like the things that I've tried before that I've made note of that said, oh, this is very good. I had countless things from which to draw or examples from which to draw. And to Nicola's point, though, I think that was sort of a sign, though, that you really like citrus fragrances as your summer picks or as your year-round picks. And I think the same could be probably said of every one of us. I think we've all made some really high praise for the citrus perfume before. We dropped that citrus episode with Nicola and I just a little while ago. So if you are interested in citrus perfumes, we have that topic very well covered, and we'll probably do so again in the near future. But in the meantime, I think we kind of wanted just to challenge ourselves with this episode, just to break the norm, to break expectations, and to offer, some recommendations of scents that just focus on other textures, other temperatures, other note profiles. And so as uncomfortable as it would normally be for me to say this, or something like this, I feel like this is actually one of those areas of perfume that I truly do have some bona fide expertise in. Like, this is the area that if I were forced to only explore one type of fragrance for the rest of my life, it would probably be this kind of non-citrus summery perfume. Just because I find myself not in any disdain at all of citrus perfumes. Like I said, I love them, but more so just because this kind of fragrance typically appeals to my sensibilities surrounding textures, or surrounding cooler temperatures and relaxing note profiles. So there's something about this kind of scent that I find myself wanting to wear, and in my own perfume making adventures wanting to make. So I'll just go out and say that if you ever want more recommendations beyond what we say in this chat, please feel free to reach out to me anytime, and I'll be able to provide a very lengthy list of scents like this if this area appeals to you. And I'm sure anybody on this chat would say the same. One important thing to note, like Nicola said, I think our approach here, we have to note that some of the perfumes that we talk about might contain a citrus accord listed in the notes. But as we all know, or as many of us know who have been into fragrances for a while, the notes list of a fragrance doesn't always necessarily reflect what it smells the most of, or even what it smells like, period. Notes are often designed as a post-creation thing to help kind of guide the wearer through some expectations of what you might smell like. It doesn't necessarily mean that any of these scents really have to include or not include anything citrus related in the wide world of perfume materials. You know, citrus perfume materials, whether they're natural or synthetic, often provide like a lift, often provide a lightness of touch that is needed in compositions to add, like I said, lift or airiness, if you will, to a composition to make sure that those heavier middle and base notes don't just sort of make it a stodgy affair. So I do want to mention that if you see a perfume in this list that you happen to know has a citrus note in it, it's our argument that it's not so present so as to make it a quote unquote citrus fragrance.
Good point.
So I've organized personally my picks to intentionally save my personal favorite of these three main picks for last. But then I do have some honorable mentions to mention at the end. I do want to also note that I like every single one of those honorable mentions so much that I would have been willing to place any of them within the first two selections. So I did want to mention that as well. I don't know how you two approach that, but that's just sort of where I'm going.
Yeah, I will say I picked a lot of stuff like you, Adam. I found this very, very easy to make selections for. I have a ton here. I didn't rate them to be frank, so I'm kind of like, oh boy, how do I rate these? But so I may be going in kind of a somewhat random order, but that's okay. But I've definitely got some honorable mentions that I can sort of toss in as well based on what I decide to sort of focus on. But yeah, I love this topic. I like, we were just speaking about, again, before we got on camera here, about things that are sort of adjacent to perfume, but are a little bit appropriate for summer, like, lotions or sunscreens or something like that. And I think what's interesting is this whole idea of textural aspects or things that maybe make your skin smell cool or feel cool, sorry. Or maybe have those certain qualities, whereas I think citruses to me always are like kind of this brightness and popping sensation, all of that. And it's not to say that you can't get that with a non-citrus fragrance, but it's just sort of intriguing how the non-citrus elements have to do maybe some of that work that those citrus things do, but with different language, if you will. So I don't know, there's a lot of material here, I think, to work with. So who'd like to start us off?
Shall I go first? Because I've got I'm going to come in with what I consider my cheating fragrance first, because it does have in it.
Please do.
I don't think either of you will be particularly surprised by this selection, actually, but it's Saint Julep by Imaginary Authors. Part of the reason that I wanted to bring this one is I've just bought it, and so it feels quite nice when you've got a new perfume to wear it a lot. But I actually did specifically buy it for the summer because it's been quite hot here in the UK, and I felt like I wanted something with that kind of coolness. So the whole vibe of Saint Julep is, I suppose, related to a mint julep cocktail. So it's got sweet mint, tangerine, but I don't get very much of the tangerine at all, which is why I allowed myself it. Southern magnolia, no idea what southern magnolia smells like as opposed to different sort of magnolia, but okay. Bourbon, grisolva, which is a synthetic form of ambergris, kind of that marine, salty, fresh, sugar cube accord, and crushed ice. So you can see there's a lot of cooling, refreshing components there. The thing that I find really interesting about it is the grisolva. So it's got that kind of, I don't tend to like things that have got a lot of cologne in for that sea breezy effect. But here I find there to be something ever so slightly, like, if I say sweaty, that sounds unpleasant, but I mean like almost like salt crystals on skin type warmth hiding in and amongst the coolness. And I find that sort of skin after you've had a dip in the sea and you maybe are like a little bit chilled. I find that quite compelling, and I really like this because it's one of those fragrances you can just spray on. You can spray it on again. It never seems to be too overwhelming. It is quite diffusive, but it never seems to kind of overwhelm you. And I quite like that I can top up during the day with it. I just like the vibe of it. It's just very sort of chilled out. I mean, I like cocktails, so that whole kind of bourbon and mint thing is really nice too. It doesn't smell. It has like a hint of booziness to it. It's not. You don't smell like you've spilled, a bottle of whiskey on yourself when you wear it at all. You don't smell like the morning after the night out or anything like that. It's a very clean fragrance. The mint in the opening is just perfection, and then it goes into that lovely ambergris type marine, but not really marine, just a touch marine. And then with the ice accord and the sugar cube accord, which has got a kind of crunchy texture to it even, which is really cool. So yeah, I just super easy, super fantastic holiday wear scent for me. This, if you're going somewhere warm, just take this with you. It's got that slightly party vibe, bit of cooling refreshment, super easy to wear any day of the week.
I'm really glad you mentioned this perfume, because what I really love about mint julep is that it brings back, there's something in it that is very specific scent memory to me as a child of ice in like a big aluminum bucket, which is, have a memory of like my parents you used to be able to get sodas, and often like if you'd have a picnic, you'd buy sodas from a local shop that would put them in refillable bottles, and you put them into a big old bucket, galvanized aluminum bucket of ice, and that has a smell to it. It's just something about the ice melting in a metal container that is exactly that smell in that fragrance. And to me, it's a very pleasant, happy smell. I associate it very much with being a kid and being off, for summer holidays from school. And I was like, oh my God, when I first smelled that perfume, I was like, that's exactly that summer smell, like kind of just getting away with mischief and stuff because
yeah,
you can or whatever. But there's something a little mischievous in that perfume that I really love. It's amazing.
Yeah, I'm really glad to hear you love it too. It is. It's a really cool. I like that it's a mischievous fragrance now.
yeah, that's definitely what I was thinking. Adam, what have you got?
Well, it just so happens that my first slotted pick was another imaginary author's fragrance. I do also want to say, before I get into that, that it's interesting. I'm just noticing now as I look through my picks today, I'm happy to report that 2 of my 3 main ones are less than $100 per bottle, and many of my honorable mentions are as well. And I'm curious to see by the time we end this discussion if that is maybe the results of these note profiles more than the house, or if it's more that the house pricing over the type of perfume. I'm not sure, but that is an interesting correlation to make either way. So my imaginary author's pick, I very well could have chosen that one. That's an excellent one. And it's almost a surprise that I didn't, given how much I love minty notes in fragrance. But Fox in the Flower Bed is my imaginary author's choice. Now, I wore this a lot when I last wore it, actually in the winter, while I was writing about it and sort of experiencing it then. And I described it in cooler weather, and probably I would feel this way about it in early to mid-spring as well, as an aldehydic floral. And I think that might still be true if I put it on in the summertime too, but more so in the heat. There is a luminescent, glowing kind of honey quality or honey note actually in this fragrance that I think makes it just as bright and jubilant in the summer. Thankfully, it's rendered in a way that it doesn't become too sweet or stodgy for a summertime wear. I love that it, as an aldehydic floral, though, it does not skew, in that kind of old-fashioned accord of aldehydic florals often have, where it gets very powdery and very cosmetic. To the contrary, it's very light and very, like I said, luminescent, and with that, in this case, the bouquet of florals, instead of being like an iris, which is typical of, aldehydic florals, it goes with notes of other white florals, tulip in jasmine. And both of those are also rendered quite light and airy as well. There's actually quote unquote a mountain air accord in this, it also uses some frankincense and some other materials to kind of round out the the body of the perfume. Its top notes and like marketing overall kind of place Fox in the Flower Bed in like an alpine meadow kind of setting. But I do think that there are some elements of it that kind of resemble like the watery environments that, you know, a certain someone, Mr. Jean-Claude Elena, liked to play with for Hermes. The Jardin series does kind of come to mind for me when I wear this, even though the Jardin series separates itself with some fruitier, tropical fruitier, greener and herbaceous accords that this does not have. But again, if you like that kind of watercolor approach to fragrance blending, I do think you'll appreciate something about Fox in the Flower Bed. I definitely look back on, you know, Josh Meyer's work and kind of feel like this is, if not the crowning achievement, then a seriously noteworthy one, because, you know, many of his fragrances, I would say, mint julep included, have like this like really delightful, playful feeling. And then he kind of like divides his work up in this way where it's like, it feels like almost a little bit over half of them are like super playful, super fun, super jubilant, a little sweet, not too sweet most of the time, but, you know, kind of on the sweeter side. And like put together notes that seem very playful and youthful. And then there's like a section of his house where it's like dark, you know, like bull's blood comes to mind, cobra and canary come to mind, those kinds of things. And even those have like their sweetness to balance them out to some extent, maybe less so bull's blood, more so cobra canary or city on fire. But in between those two sides of the house's work lays this thing, this sort of very separate in my mind composition of Fox in the Flower Bed, where it is easy and bright and summery to wear, but it has a sort of slight pensiveness about it, a slight reflective mood to me that I really appreciate about it. And I think that Josh really deserves a lot of credit for this creation in particular. And I mean, a number of his works are really well celebrated in the community. So I feel really good about this being the first one I talk about today. And I'm glad that I happened to slot it in as my first thing to talk about right after Nicola's.
Yeah, it's another one that I really love as well, but I was really interested because I wanted to see if this came up. I went to a really interesting talk a couple of weeks ago about the perfumes that are mentioned in the Bible and how this researcher has tried to figure out what, you know, because people use different names for things back then. And so he's tried to kind of decode what actually things might have smelt like. And one of the things he mentioned in that talk was that frankincense, the ingredient frankincense, has an ability to act on our the part of our brain which senses temperature. So when we smell frankincense, we experience a cooling of temperatures. So I thought that was really interesting because I did wonder if there were any fragrances that would come up that had frankincense in, because you know you tend to think of it as being that kind of incense, you know, and kind of burning and warm and smoke, not necessarily in that cooling way, but it obviously is. And it explains to me, because I really quite like wearing those kind of churchy fragrances in the summer. And last summer, I wore a lot of that Ariza El Legrand that you gave me, Adam, the Malaga Santa. And I couldn't figure out why I was really just enjoying it so much all summer. And it's because it's got frankincense in. And I just think that's really, really neat little facts that I learnt the other day.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. I wasn't aware that that we perceive frankincense in that way. That's so interesting.
Oh,
yeah.
And also interesting that frankincense is often described as slightly lemon-like in its profile. And obviously there are many, many summery fragrances that have and contain lemon accords or extractions. So it does. I love when we have the opportunity to scientifically connect the dots on something like that in perfume, because otherwise a lot of this is very just, you know, subjective in the way we wear things. But no, it's nice to have something that's anchored in reality like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what's your first one then, John? Have you got an imaginary authors too?
I do not specifically know, but this is kind of interesting because it sort of makes this big full circle of things. So my first perfume is something from J Scent now, which really brings this full circle, doesn't it? Because if I recall now, this all started with Adam, who said, "Oh, I've got this interesting brand to tell you all about." And I said, "Oh God, that's intriguing." And then if I recall, I think, Nicola, didn't you write about Jason from Asanza? Did you? Was it?
Yes, yeah. So I tried them at Essence and really liked them, but went to see them on Adam's Say So.
Yeah, exactly. So I was like, "Oh my goodness, look at this! This is crazy." Because I saw your article and I was like, "Oh, this is really funny."
I'm an influencer now. I've influenced the both of you.
You did. So I got their package, and it was tough because I liked a lot of the fragrances, and I ended up buying two, which is like good. It's like I can't settle on one; I have to buy two, and there was still more that I liked. But so there were two that I bought, and it was tough. There were a lot of like choices I could have gone with, but two that I picked were hydrangea and paper soap, and the one I'm smelling right now is paper soap. This is crazy. Now, some people are going to love this and some may really not like paper soap. But what is remarkable about paper soap is that, and what I like so much about many of the J scents is that they kind of are exactly what they say they are. Like, and I think they do transcend it. But I think this wants to be, in some ways, no more than this kind of sliver of soap that you get in some sort of a dispensing machine. And I know years and years and years ago, when I was a very young child, I used to actually have a machine where you'd push a button and they would give you this tiny sliver of soap that you could wash your hands with. And this is a very soapy fragrance. The listed notes of it are essentially aldehydes, rose, jasmine, lavender, geranium, and musk. I think that's what it is. But it's essentially lots of aldehyde, some musk. Adam, you're giggling like a little. This is hysterical.
So, do go on. You'll see.
Yeah, so no citrus whatsoever. It's absolutely. It's just freaking joyful. It's so joyful. It's like the best kind of soap smell you can imagine. It's that. Okay, you know what it is? I'll tell you exactly what the smell is. This is that smell when you paid a little extra for a slightly better hotel room and you get to the hotel room and it meets all of it exceeds your expectations. And part of it is that, this soap smells good, doesn't it? Like in addition to the fact that you got a nice hotel room, the soap smells really good as well. This is the smell of that kind of soap that you would expect. And the other thing is it smells really, really good on skin. And this is exactly the kind of weather that you want to wear something like this in. And it does it all with no citrus whatsoever, which is remarkable. So I can't say anything more than that because that covers it all. It doesn't pretend to be more than that, but it's miraculous at what it does. Enormous staying power too. This thing lasts forever, by the way. I feel like you have something, a burning thing you want to say.
Out of curiosity, John, you said the other one that you got was hydrangea. Would you qualify? I haven't actually smelled that specific one yet. However, I am about to test all of them. Finally, at long last, leave it to me, like the person who actually brought both of you to this house. I haven't even smelled all of their offerings yet. They have quite a few, so I mean, it's a great house to check out no matter what. We'll evangelize the heck out of them. But hydrangea, what's that one like, and does it qualify under this department of fragrances?
It came really close to. I could almost have done it today. The only reason I didn't quite is hydrangea. I think you're going to find it. I think you would both find interesting in that. What I like about it is it starts off as kind of that's an interesting floral smell. But it's got this weird muskiness right underneath it, like that just kind of strange jasmine-like funky, but it's not even funkiness. It's more like muskiness. That's like what you would expect from a flower that isn't just about like pretty and doesn't have this enormous smell. Like hydrangeas don't have this huge smell the way that roses or lilacs do. And it's interesting. It's like something a little bit old, like it's a dried flower or something. And so I'm not sure if in really intense heat that would be quite as good. Having said that, it's still a warm weather fragrance though. But it's damn interesting. It's definitely interesting.
Maybe you'd put it in like categorize it under spring, late summer, early fall kind of, instead of the midsummer heat.
Yeah, that's what I would say. Yeah. So that's my choice. And now I'm going to go back to you, Nicola. What have you got for us for our next choice?
Okay. So one of the things that's important for me about a summer fragrance is staying power, because I think in the summer, your fragrance has got to compete with so much more. So it's got to compete with, heightened smells outside, perspiration, sun cream. And I think it's really actually quite difficult to either pick something that complements those other fragrances that it's going to be battling with, or is strong enough that it kind of knocks those ones out and becomes what you then smell of. So my next pick is one that I think kind of complements the gamut of summer smells. And my final pick, which is one of my favorite fragrances of all time, is one that will knock them out. So the one that complements is Jardin de Kerelos by Pierre Guillaume. And this is it's ripe figs, sycamore wood, with a white peach, and then tuberose and musks. So there's no citrus in there. There is like the tart, bracing kind of gasp at the beginning from this white peach, which is really nice, and it gives you that like sort of slightly crunchy feel, and then it moves into just really lovely fig, and you get that glaucous texture that fig has in that kind of blooming texture, and it feels very complementary to summer skin. It feels quite skin textured. It's a very happy, happy-go-lucky. No, I don't think there's much melancholia about it. There's nothing too moody about it. Again, it's very easy to spray on, and it will take you from daytime on the beach to a night out at a nice restaurant very easily. It's just it's such a workhorse fragrance, and I think. I wanted to bring a fig because figs are quite synonymous with summer for me, but so many figs have citrus with them. So many, another one I was going to mention was Fico di Amalfi, but it's so citrusy, particularly in the top, that I thought, well, actually, there's about 4 different citruses mentioned in that one. I can't, in all good conscience, mention it when there is Jardin de Kerelos, which doesn't appear, well, I'm sure it's got some citrus in, but it's not listed, certainly. So yeah, just real easy fragrance, real summery, summer holidays in a bottle is this. It really is.
No, that sounds lovely. I was going to say that particular note you mentioned of white peach is interesting, because we have a perception in our heads about the smell of peach, and I think there's quite a difference between that sort of fainter, more sort of like an Asiatic type of notion of a peach, as opposed to like this really like bruised, overly sweet, syrupy kind of peach, which I think we might be more familiar with. But there's that like really crunchy, very green and gently sweet kind of a peach smell that I think is a little different, and must be fascinating to smell in there as a note.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and we were talking about textural fragrances. There are layers of texture in here. There's the fig, there's the peach, because the textures are similar, they're kind of related, but they're not the same. And so not only do you get the fascination of the note, but you get that kind of almost like sensatorial firing that happens as well, which is quite cool. Yeah, so it's a really, we've talked at great length how cool I think Pierre Guillaume is, and I think that's just another example. And it's a scent that's been around. I think it came out something like 2006. So it's been around forever. And it still stands up against a lot of, other fig fragrances that have come after it. And I think it knocks many of them out of the water. It's interesting. It does fig really well, and it stays. So yeah, it's a really good fragrance.
Yeah, amazing. Adam, what did yeah, you're next.
Okay, well, it just so happens that just like John's number two pick, my number two pick was a fragrance from Jason. That's why I was giggling incessantly while on mute while you were talking about yours. Actually, as a matter of fact, in a display of true coincidence, because listeners and viewers, we do not talk about our choices beforehand, probably for moments like this where we inevitably have a situation where we have some similarities in taste. But yeah, I actually wrote down in my notes this one, which is Hakka, Hakka from J Scent. And I also wrote down roasted green tea. I'm not committed to talking fully about roasted green tea today, just because Hakka for me does the summery thing just slightly better, similar to John's, where you love these two scents from them, but maybe one of them behaves slightly better in the heat than the other. In my case, my level 2 J Scent summer scent would be roasted green tea. I would just say that I had not previously smelled true funky vegetal green tea in fragrance, until I had smelled roasted green tea from J Scent. It's just this like aerated minty quality with some like honest to goodness like peanut smells at the top, and I say that like peanut shells, not necessarily gourmandy or overly salty, more like that kind of airy, like peanuts wafting from their shell kind of smell. And then of course the green tea comes in accord with that mint, and I think that selection itself kind of captures like that algal quality that loose leaf green tea has, with a bit of a tannic kick too. Putting that aside, not to split hairs here with like that being two selections, I guess it is. But Hakka is the scent so far. Again, I haven't experienced all their creations yet. The scent from J Scent that thus far gives me like it instills such a reaction in me so as to be related to like, I don't know, just it has like a reaction that it causes in me that's like my precious, like just sort of like I am just sort of enraptured and excited by this scent, and also very comforted and like like it just sort of gets me, it gets at me, I should say. But Hakka is a scent that's as a mint fan, I'm gonna always recommend it. It's all about peppermint at the top. And it does sort of successfully communicate minty qualities throughout its life on skin. Obviously, a little bit less so as it wears on throughout the day, but it does a very good job at holding on to that true peppermint smell. This is a peppermint scent, not a spearmint, not a wintergreen kind of smell. This is very, very much peppermint. And if you're not familiar with that, I mean, I think peppermint versus other types of mint, and there are many, many varieties. As John can attest to. I think peppermint kind of is very much noted by like that balance of like sweetness with the rest of it. It has a very natural kind of sweetness, almost like the type of sweetness that you smell inherent in like aniseed and like that kind of nature's sugar kind of sweetness away. It's not like, compare that to like the mint note in mint julep that Nicola was talking about earlier, where like Josh, the perfumer, adds sweetener, so to speak, to that scent. Whereas the sweetness present in Hakka is like very, very natural and very, very like of its constituents, and less of like, it doesn't have like a sugary or a sweet note in it really to speak of. That said, there is an amber note somewhere snuck in there at the very base. I wouldn't say it's an ambery scent, and I don't even think that's lending it much sweetness to begin with. But the notes include bergamot. Now, that's the thing. It does include a bergamot note. Like we said earlier, though, none of the scents I think we're bringing today you'd ever smell and think, this is a citrus scent. And I will doggedly defend my choice here, because I've worn it quite a few times, and every time I wear it, I'm very excited and very jubilant. But I'm never, ever thinking to myself, that's a wonderful, expression of bergamot. No, I think they just added some maybe dihydromercenol or another kind of citrus-like material. And because it kind of gives off a bergamot touch, I think they added that into the notes list. It is not as citrus scent to me. The interesting thing about this perfume, though, beyond the peppermint quality, if you're a mint fan, you're going to love this. And if you're not, you're going to hate this. I think if you're a floral fan, though, you can appreciate the heart, because the heart kind of mixes a very familiar accord of jasmine and lily and iris. Now, the iris in this is completely dry, non-powdery, not any kind of stuffiness, no humidity lent from that iris whatsoever. This is a very peppery, dry kind of interpretation of this like floral melange. Again, I think you'll smell it and you'll go, okay, I might have smelled something like that in the heart before. But this is just sort of beautifully done, as is every single J scent I've ever smelled. They're all just of high quality, and the blending is just intelligent and hits all the notes in the way that you want them to hit. I could talk at length about this, so I'll be quiet now. But it's sort of a must smell if you like mint, and I would also consider it a must smell if you like summery interpretations of like jasmine and white florals.
Yeah, that's that's a great choice. What I remember about Haka in particular was that there's a kind of a dry vegetal sort of quality to the mint as well too, which is so interesting because it doesn't have that. I kept expecting it to possibly turn into like a mint ice cream, like a mint chocolate where the chocolate's been taken out sort of a thing, and it doesn't happen. Like it stays in this sort of dry, pure minty type of stage, but with it becoming more like something within a garden or something like that. It's very interesting exploration of that idea of mint as a concept, which I thought, wow, that's so cool. And I like that they kind of, a lot of the fragrances are, I don't want to say they stay in their lane, but they do fully explore an idea. Maybe that's what I want to say about them. They take an idea and they really explore the notion within that idea, which is really cool about that one, I thought.
Yeah, I think we could very much become the J-Scent podcast. I think just like Pierre Guillaume and some other houses that we've talked about a few times before. There's another thing coming up. We'll get there, but I think we're very much in danger of becoming just the J-Scent show, and I think they deserve every bit of that praise.
I agree.
What's next for you then, John?
This is an interesting one because it's not too often that I'll walk into I don't go to a lot of perfume stores. I say, hey, can I try that? Instantly love it and buy it. Like this just isn't a thing I do very often these days. But I was in LA a couple months ago, was at Scent Bar, was curious to smell something, smelled it, loved it, and bought it. And this is Ghost in the Shell from État Libre d'Orange, which had very mixed reviews by people. What I really, it absolutely fits what we're talking about. It does have a citrus note. Oh man, this is so beautiful. I love this. I know that for some folks, this was, I think I'll address one of the problems about the fragrance. I think people who had a vested interest in this as an anime, as a film, they're probably trying to compare those things to the actual fragrance. And I have no particular background in any of that. I was just sort of curious about it as a fragrance. And what is curious about this fragrance is that all of the listed notes in it are essentially just chemical aroma. They're just aroma chemicals. There's nothing natural. I think the only things that are natural that they list are a bit of yuzu at the top, some jasmine, and a listing of moss at the base. But there's other crazy things here, like a copyrighted component called aqual, which I'm not familiar with. Milk, a milk note, a skin note. Vinyl glycol, organox, like these other like component names that just they do certain things within fragrance, but they just decided we're going to completely go with a handful of natural components, fully listing out just the synthetic components that are made of it, which again fits this whole anime of this kind of slightly cyborged creature, with sort of human elements living inside, of this shell, like it's it fits all of that. But what you get in the process is this unbelievably fresh fragrance that smells vaguely of a kind of jasmine type rose, maybe with a slight lily of the valley-ish touch on top. A little hint of a kind of beachy freshness at the beginning. But this is all what I love about this is that it is extremely hard to pinpoint what you're smelling. You're vaguely smelling sweetness, a tinge of something synthetic, but purposefully done so, and it's interesting to smell it. Like there's almost a slightly plasticky quality to it. It's very breezy. There is something in here that I would say vacillates between like just the smell of not so much skin, but like maybe a faint bit of sweat mixed with just this very vague woodiness that doesn't really have a specific wood to it. So what I think some of the idea of the fragrance was to just give these hints of something very indescribable that was somewhere between artificial and real, or, cyborgy and human. And you were supposed to fall somewhere in those two extremes and kind of pick something. But I find this very comfortable. I find it comfortable not being able to figure out what the things are. And I was able to kind of suspend disbelief. I think some people weren't quite so comfortable with that. Perhaps they may have wanted to actually say, well, what is this? What's actually in here? Come on. But it overall feels very pastel, very fresh, and very soothing. And I just love the effect of it. I think it's a beautiful perfume. I think people were really on the fence about it. I'm not sure. Which I suppose is what this whole brand is about. It's very controversial. They like courting controversy, as we know. I really love it though. I think it's a great summer fragrance.
Mm.
What about you,
I've not
Nicola?
smelled that one yet. I'm very curious now. I mean, it was one of those things that I think I just saw the news about it and I was like, oh, okay, that sounds interesting, and moved on. And then it just so happens that everything you just said, it compels me greatly.
I must say, I was sort of expecting to not like it because I did read some of the reviews and some of the press, and I thought, oh, it sounds like one of those high concept perfumes, but by the time you smell it, it will be, it doesn't live up to all this hype, or it doesn't live up to the sort of the things that it's referencing. It's not going to be as exciting or interesting as the things it's referencing. But what I wasn't expecting is that it would actually create a world of its own, which is sort of a parallel world to the references that it is referring to. And that part, it just really intrigues me. It's still, in fact, as I'm smelling it now, it's even a little different than the first time I sprayed it, the few times that I've worn it. It shifts quite a bit, which I think is part of what happens when you use certain, particularly some of these extremely new aroma chems that have, strange effects in the air that are not quite as charted as some other stuff. But anyway, yeah, I thought it's really worth it. It's a really good wear for summer.
Sounds great. I'm also similarly intrigued now. I think there's the whole debate around aroma chems versus naturals will no doubt rage for many years to come, but one of the things that aroma chemicals do, which is particularly relevant, sometimes do, which is particularly relevant to this sort of topic, is last well and diffuse well in warm temperatures. They do a lot of heavy lifting in perfumes, in modern perfumery, and I think they often have the backbone in order to make a scent detectable on a warm day when you've been sweating a bit, and it helps them stick around. It helps them still be there and still be noticeable. And I think that's, when you're looking at perfumes to wear in hot weather, that's a really, unless you want to go down the oud route, it's a really great quality to have. Not that there's anything wrong with oud. I think that is that's probably the most kind of fulsome, long-lasting natural that I can think of. And obviously it's not always natural even. So Yeah, it's a minefield, but I like a good aroma chemical in the summer for sure.
Very nice. What have you got next for us, by the way?
So this is one of my favorite perfumes of all time. I've probably talked about it before, but it comes alive in the summer, much more so than the winter. It's great in the winter, but in the summer it's just amazing. And it's Trey by Nicola Vermeer Creations, which is it probably is. It's definitely getting up there for being one of my favorite things to wear in heat. The notes list is bonkers. Blue ginger from Madagascar, aloe, cinnamon bark, ganja effects, blackcurrant absolute, basil, sambac jasmine, Egyptian jasmine, cardamom, clove, saffron, sandalwood, two different types of vetiver, incense, more sandalwood, patchouli, myrrh, vanilla, cedar, amber, oud, and oak moss. It's that is quite some notes list. It's not listed, but to me, when you spray it on, it smells like mango. A really ripe, sun-kissed, juicy mango that's been dusted in chili and perhaps even roasted a little bit. It's gorgeous. And it even has that kind of slightly chalky texture that mango has that I just find utterly delicious. Super fruity to start off with. And it's very, very spicy, really spicy, warm. It sort of just really sings from your skin. It's radiant, really diffusive, but lasts all day, even if it's really hot. And then you get into a lovely sandalwood. I don't get a lot of oud from it, I have to say, but like a kind of sandalwood, rich, woody, still spicy, still fruity, right through into the base. It's an expensive perfume, but it's one that I think it is worth. Not all expensive perfumes are worth the money, but this is one that I think really justifies it. It's Bertrand Duchefort is the perfumer, and how I always feel about his work is that he can write a formula like that. He's incredibly prolific. But I think you can really tell the perfumes that he makes for people where he's really formed a relationship with them. Sorry, that's Winnie just deciding to come and join the chat. And so I think Nicola Vermeer really brought out of him that, I feel like she pushed him. I feel like she kind of really tested him and said, look, this is what I want, capture it. And I think he did a really good job. It's unlike anything else. It's so unique. There's a lot of the spices are just so compelling with this real fruitiness and this lovely sandalwood in the bottom as well. It's just gorgeous. I feel like every time I try and describe it, I don't feel like I do it particularly much justice, because it's a bit otherworldly, I suppose. And I've got a lot of admiration for Nicola. I think she's a really fantastic creator and a fantastic, businesswoman. And I just think it's a superb, next level, top tier perfume. And if you put it on in the heat, you get it in its full 100-mile-an-hour glory. Whereas in winter, it's a little bit quieter, it's a little bit less. It kind of does this, whereas in the summer it does that. It's just fabulous.
I can imagine that whole, when you mentioned sandalwood just now, I realized that, I don't really wear a whole lot of, not by design, but just in recent memory, I'm like, I don't wear a lot of fragrances that have sandalwood in them in the summer, but it just, wow, that must smell really interesting in summer, because I tend to think of sandalwood as being pretty heavy and, it's something that I just generally tend to wear in cooler weather, but that must smell. It sounded really luxurious when you were describing it now,
Yeah, luxurious is a really good word for it. It is. It's sumptuous, luxurious, opulent, all those things, decadent. It's lovely. Like your summer holiday buffet should be.
Very good.
So what's your final main pick, Adam?
Yeah.
Well, gang, I'm 3 for 3 in terms of choosing scents. from houses that you both did as well. Because my third, and again, reminder, this is the fragrance that's sort of my favorite summer fragrance that I've discovered so far. This is like my big deal pick. This is Solsekia from Pierre Guillaume. So another Pierre Guillaume scent. Okay. I mean, I do want to table this for a second because I feel like at this point, we've referenced Pierre Guillaume so much that it almost feels a little bit like we're asking for people who are viewers or regular viewers of the program to just kind of come in and say, okay, guys, we get it, right? Like, we get that you like this house. To that, I would say the house has like 140 cents, so, if we were choosing a house that had like maybe 10 or maybe 25 releases or less, I would feel a little bit more guilty referencing them so much just because there's a finite number of scents that could be involved. But that's just not the case with Pierre. He makes any and every kind of fragrance. He makes gourmands. He makes citrus scents. He makes non-citrus summer scents in the case of this one. He makes a fragrance that actually smells a little bit like Nicola's first choice, the imaginary author scent. He makes all different kinds of fragrances, so I never feel bad evangelizing Pierre Guillaume, similar to how I now evangelize J-Scent, because they have both houses actually have quite a few different scents, and Pierre Guillaume especially. But out of all of those scents that I've tried from that house, I mean, this has got to be Solsekia has got to be probably the one that I just automatically, and from the very first time I tried it, just forged such a strong association with summertime. And, again, accomplished without much in the way of citrus. Now, okay, if you are looking at the page on Fragrantica's database, you will see an accord listed as citruses. Now, again, the funny part is that that comes directly from the house itself. And even Pierre didn't even bother to say, oh, this is bergamot, this is lemon, this is orange. He didn't even bother to reference a specific citrus. Why, you might ask? Because he's probably just used one or two aroma chemicals that are typically associated with citruses, but do not actually have that big of a citric impact on the scent. It is, I just like Haka from J-Scent, I do not think you'd pick up Solsekia from Pierre Guillaume and say, oh, what a citrus scent. In fact, I think you'd actually be quite challenged to identify the citrus nature of it. Maybe you feel differently, Nicola, because I know you have experience with the scent too.
I mean, it was released as a trio of citruses.
Okay, fair. I hear that. I don't know. I've never sprayed this on, and I've never said to myself, like, this is such similar to how the creator himself does not identify a singular citrus in it. I can't smell this and think, this reminds me of grapefruit, or this reminds me of this, that, and the other thing. I just don't get it. But you make a good point. I took a risk, but like, here's the thing. This is such a good summer scent. And it to me, it's more about a really nice white musk blend and an aloe accord, and maybe like that peppery quality that it has, courtesy of, I think he lists allspice in the notes, if I'm not mistaken. So to me, like, it's like an aromatic, white musky kind of smell. It certainly, I mean, if I had to think of a citrus that might be more present than others, I'd say bergamot. But again, I think it's more so from a material called dihydromercenol than anything else, which is John, you might feel differently about this than I do. You're the very, very legitimate perfumer among the three of us, but I would say dihydromercenol smells almost like a texture and like a watery kind of quality, and an interesting. It's an interesting material. It's been used a lot in aquatics and in citrus scents before. I would say it's probably used here. But the thing about it is that, and the reason why I just, consequences be damned, drove it to my most precious spot on this list, is that you know that like that summer feeling that we all I think have, depending on where we live in the world. If you live in a place in the world where summer has an apex of heat, unlike other areas where it's kind of hot, has an equilibrium of heat like for most of the year. I live in the northeast of the United States, so for me, like summer is properly warm, and then other parts of the year are properly cold. So if you live in that kind of area of the world, I think there, like for most people in those kinds of areas, there is inevitably a point in every summer where it just gets so hot that you're just like, and it's maybe so humid or just so hot in general that you're just like, I'm not doing anything today. Like I am not, there's nothing I'm going to occupy my time with today. Today, I am just sitting here, and time goes very slowly on those days, probably because you're not doing anything, but also probably because summer days are long to begin with. And you just, if you're blessed enough to have AC, then maybe this is a little less severe for you, but this could be true even if you just have a single AC unit in your bedroom, like my wife and I do here, where you have reached a point in the summer where it's just so hot that you just stay in that room all day, and time is like, again, just moving so very creepingly along. There's like this weird part in every summer that happens like that, and it has like this really strange effect on time, and like, I don't know, it's like a summer haze feeling, basically. It's more of a feeling and an effect of living through that kind of thing when your body is used to a range of temperatures than not. And so for me, this scent smells like that day. It smells like that, just sort of carefree. I'm relaxed because I have to relax because it's so darn hot out that I cannot do anything but relax, or try to. That is the smell of Soseki to me. It's like easygoing. My mind is sort of in this like weird liminal relaxation space, and I love it. It's sort of peaceful, and that's sort of the emotion I associate most with like the middle of summer. So for me, that's what it accomplishes. I cannot talk about summer without talking about the scent. I'll defend my choice one last time just by saying that. If we made a citrus video already, Nicola. I did not even think once about bringing the scent. That's all. No. It's just, it's again, just to describe the fragrance itself a little bit more than my weird tangential ramblings did just a moment ago. I will say that there's like an unusual accord in this of aloe vera. I wrote about some aloe scents on the site before, and this was the pinnacle of them. But there's an aqueousness. There's a slight spice in the form of I think he lists both black pepper and I also want to say he lists allspice as well. And it's all very grounded. It's very relaxing scent, and it's one that I would hesitate not to reach for at any point during the summer.
I was really interested in what you said something that we haven't really done yet so far in this conversation, where you said you described a day and you described the smell, and you kind of equated them as like, well, that the smell and the day are kind of representations of each other. Like the smell fits the day and the day fits the smell. And I hadn't really thought about that. Like, 'cause some of these choices are, this would be great to wear on a hot day, but not so much like that. This is sort of the smell of that day, which is an interesting approach to this topic, right? That this sort of almost represents that kind of really oppressive day where it's too oppressive to even move. You might just stay huddled into, your AC or something. Like that's really interesting concept in a way. It's almost like it's a depiction of a state or a place in time or something. It's so interesting. I like that concept.
It's so rare that scents do that. I mean, I think we all have at least one scent, maybe more, that we can think of that does something like that. But I think when you find a scent like that, it's such a special connection because it's so specific, and it's usually very specific to you. I do think some other people might be able to smell this and know what I'm talking about. Like that's the thing about when you talk about scents with other people. You always run the risk of the fact that their associations with a scent might vary completely differently than from yours. But I think there is sort of like an element of, at least I think if you could smell it, you would say, well, I could see where that might remind you of an air conditioned room. You know what I mean? Or I could see where that might remind you of like a state of relaxation, like you're like a vacation or like, doing something like that. I think there's something that, it's one of those things where we don't really have a lot of language for this, but the idea that, like you said, John, like that a scent can be associated with a specific state of being. It's sort of very subjective, but also there must be a science there. Otherwise, why would we experience it in the first place? We're nothing if not the result of evolutionary impulses and things like that. So, I mean, it's like, why do we feel these things? I don't know, but I know that I feel it here.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. Round us up, John, with your last selection.
I will. So my selection is a bit strange because it's something is very new for me. I've actually picked a few things that are quite new for me, which again is interesting because I have many things that I could have chosen, but I decided to go with something new. I will say I'm actually still, I love this fragrance. I have not worn it much, but it is I will even say it's a peculiar choice, I think. It's by a brand that is known for some, oh my goodness, hello, Miss Dog, or Miss Dog. It's a brand that's known for having very summery perfumes. But this is this very strange summery choice. So this is also from Carthusia, which I've had a lot of fragrances that I've liked by Carthusia. This is called Terra Mia. What's really unusual about this fragrance, though, is that if you can imagine, it's a transparent, vapory, lightweight perfume that's kind of based on the notes of coffee and hazelnut, which sounds bizarre. I mean, you're going to think, what the hell? And it's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating smell. I mean, if you can imagine, I'm setting a picture for you. If you can imagine a kind of coffee hazelnutty concoction, maybe like a gelato or something like that, but by the beach. That's sort of where this is headed. Like, it's such an odd idea, and I can't even imagine sort of what was the thought process, at the I don't know, the creative table or whatever we were talking about. And this is, I'm going to be looking at the notes because it's a weird note breakdown. There is a listing of bergamot. It's pretty small. I don't actually detect any, I don't really smell much citrus here at all because the opening is pretty much like this pink peppery type thing. It goes straight into just coffee, hazelnuts, and essentially orange blossom, which is the most of the fragrance. This is I want to say this is Luca Maffei who made this perfume. Yeah, this is Luca Maffei. And then it ends up with a little bit of ambroxan, some vanilla, and some resins of some sort, which are probably like a benzoin or something like that. So there is a deeper, more ambery side to it, but this beginning part and for the first couple of hours is just absolutely sheer, and it has that really nice orange blossomy kind of feel, which for me is always a very summery choice. And it plays this incredibly delicate balance of something that's almost ready to spill over into a gourmand and a sticky gourmand on top of that, but doesn't quite do it and stays more toward more of a transparent floral. Doesn't completely go over that way either. And I'm not always about balance. Like, I don't think fragrances have to be completely balanced in this very sort of French way or something. Like, I think it's fine for things to go lopsided and crazy. But here, the balance is just sort of right. I'm not sure everyone's going to like this fragrance, though, because, again, coffee is a bit strange. Hazelnut is a bit strange for summer. This just absolutely smells really good on my skin, though. I feel really happy wearing it. And I think it's because it's so unexpected. Like, if this were in a heavier formulation, I would never touch this for summer. I'd be like, God, that's too heavy for summer. But I like the fact that they kind of dared to, like, no, let's do something a little bit weird here for what's essentially a lightweight and much more summery group of fragrances, and just try it out for the hell of it and see what we come up with. Really, really like it. There's also a kind of a pepperiness that comes in later. I'm getting more of a hint of it now, like something that's a little darker and more on the kind of savory edge, peppery, salty kind of feel at the end, which keeps it from being completely overindulgently sweet. But really fascinating. And I think if you like some of that kind of DNA behind the Carthusia scents, which are a little bit more aquatic, much more top note heavy, this is a great way to break a little bit, to retain some of that, but it breaks a little bit out of that shell of just the completely beachy kind of stuff that they've done before. But
they've got some really interesting, cool scents of Carthusia. They're a brand that I'd like to get to know more, because the ones that I have smelled, I've been really impressed by.
yeah.
So yeah, I'm glad you brought one, and I may have a sample of that lurking somewhere. So I think I will definitely go and check, because it sounds so interesting.
It's very interesting. Yeah, I mean, it goes against all of your common sense ideas about what's appropriate for summer, basically. So, but it works. It works somehow. Yeah.
Yeah, fabulous.
Yeah.
Have you got any honourable mentions to shout out as well?
I do have a few. So I have, let me give a couple here. So, and they're kind of all over the place. But I had a lot, so I'm going to, one I just have a bit of a sample for. So, as some may know, there's the brand Commodity, which sort of had a new life brought into them. In fact, Nicola, did you write about Commodity?
Yeah,
I think you may have. Yeah. So Commodity was a brand by the owner. I'm not sure if he's still director, but was director for Europe Perfumes for a while. They've kind of relaunched, and a few of the compositions they made before they've given a new life into. One is their Moss fragrance. This is called Moss Plus. It's kind of a sort of fur-centered, mossy fragrance with just a little bit of kind of top notey. I don't want to say it's aldehydes, and there may be a bit of a citrus at the top, but it's essentially like oak moss and a bit of a kind of piney sort of center. And it's really interesting to wear in summer. I find sometimes when oak moss is treated for in a lighter composition, I find it fascinating. Like, doesn't happen very often in perfume, but I really like it. Something that I know, Adam, you had been interested in, and I finally got myself a bottle. Love this stuff. It's a fairly session, but this is the Basilic Purpa, or the purple basil. The sort of this is from Hermes. This is one of their latest like eau de cologne type series. I think this is actually a I don't know if it's a eau de toilette or an no, it is an eau de cologne. So this is pretty much their interpretation of what the sort of purple basil smell is like. It's fairly nicely done, and fairly accurate, and it feels a little bit like a solid note, but I really like it, and it's got a slightly earthy quality to it, and it has all that kind of nice almost licorice-y qualities of purple basil in it as well. And then lastly, I'm going to go with just sort of a good old standard, which is Tamdao from Diptyque, which just absolutely lovely fragrance. Sorry. Yeah, this is certainly on their heavier side for some of the stuff that they do, but very intensely woody for me. But absolutely love this. This of the woodier fragrances, I would say this is one that I wear more in summer. Love Tamdao, and highly recommend that. Those are my honorable mentions. What about you, Nicola? What have you got?
I've just got two. So one that's really great for competing with sun cream, all the other summer smells again. Crystal Pistol, DS and Durga. I mean, it's probably vastly overpriced for what it actually is. It's described as a fragrance / enhancer. I treat it as a kind of a summery fragrance when I want to wear something really simple, and I don't want it to kind of have to work too hard against things like, sun cream. It's super simple and it really lasts. It's got a kind of neroli-ish vibe to it, orange blossomy type vibe. It's allegedly got some synthetic civet in the kind of base, but I don't really get very much of that. I do get a sort of slight warmth, but it's not particularly funky. But I think that just kind of adds to the fact that it works quite well in summer. I don't think it's not the sort of scent that's going to knock anybody's socks off, but it's good for the longevity. It's good for the fact that it does work with all these other competition, things that are going to be going on around you and on your own skin. So yeah, good for that. Good because it will last all day. And then my other one is a completely bonkers scent. It's Lens Darling Bogota. And it's bizarre. It's like rum, liquor, Coca-Cola, vanilla, like really heavy, weird ingredients.
Right, yeah.
But it smells a bit like, I mean, this is more American. I'm sure you guys do this a lot better than we do in the UK, but like a kind of Coke float. And it's, I don't know, there's something really compelling about it, but it's a really gutsy scent. It's really diffusive. It's really, I suppose, strong, really. And I found on the days where I've worn it when it's been warm, it radiates off the skin beautifully. It projects wildly. And it lasts really, really well. And it kind of goes a bit leathery on me. And I quite like that. It is heavier, but it has a kind of, like a summer's evening party feel to it, that kind of liquor and sweetness. And it feels a little bit intoxicating. And then it's got this kind of sort of slightly edgy leather in there too. So yeah, it's really a really interesting fragrance, and I'm really glad to be wearing that at the minute.
Fair enough.
Over to you, Adam.
Oh, I have so many. I like I insinuated before, I had to just strike down my list because it was my list of honorable mentions, really, just because it was getting to the point where there was like 10 or 12 of them. And I was like, no. They don't deserve that series of ramblings. I think I'll just have to cut it down. So I've cut it down quite a bit. Let me just begin by saying, and I'll try to move through them efficiently. Let me begin by saying we're all probably familiar with Acqua di Sale from Perfume Aroma at this point. It's just a classic new age aquatic. It has like this benzyl salicylate, like slightly sunscreeny feel without fully embracing all those like heavier, creamier notes that sunscreen scents typically do. It's just like sparkly herbs and like seashore. And that's really all it is. And it lasts for an age on the skin. You can see the oily slick of it on your skin. So it's very concentrated. And it truly is. It's very expensive though. So that's the only downside to the scent. It can be very, very pricey for a very concentrated 100 ml of scent. I will say that they try to give you the value, even if it's coming at a price point that is for many, many people inaccessible. But it's a beautiful scent nonetheless. And if you like the idea of any kind of aquatic, you have to try it. You have to sample it. I will say, in lieu of that, if you like the idea of a seashore scent that's not too briny and give something else, that some other substantive qualities beyond just like the wateriness or like the seashore quality, maybe something with some golden florals, some slight spicy references, some slight John already knows what I'm about to say. Maybe try our very own John Beeble's creation of Din You Dis It from January Scent Project. It's not something I'm mentioning because he's on the call. It's something I'm mentioning because I wear it often every single summer and have another personal connection with it. Beyond the fact that I am friends with John, more so because it reminds me of parts of my childhood. Wonderful, delightful summer scent that, you might feel differently, John, doesn't necessarily even involve citruses that much, if at all.
Not much at all. Yeah, good.
That's a great. Not to equate the two fragrances, but if you like the idea of Acqua di Sale, I think you get along very well with Din You Dis It. Another one I wanted to mention really quick, another kind of pairing, if you will. Mal. I'm so sorry for the pronunciation of this. Mal Aim. I'm not sure. Parfum d'Empire. If you like the idea, so it's that in concert with something like Mont Fraîche from Healy. I've been tossing around this article idea for a long time about there's so many similarities to me between those two scents, where Mont Fraîche from James Healy and Mal Aim from Parfum d'Empire both have this like agrestic, summery greenness of like mintiness and like outdoor weeds and grass and that kind of thing. But where the Healy scent really embraces the mintiness and the green tea qualities of itself, Mal Aim skews a bit more agrestic, more outdoorsy, more grassy, more like weeds in a garden kind of scent.
Right.
I think both of those are excellent summery fragrances. Sans Citrus, Dancing Light from Olfactive Studio, another one of those fragrances where I think they list one specific citric element in the notes, but it's really more about the another mint kind of a quality, more so eucalyptus, but set against a huge like enveloping chorus of white florals and freesia being one of them, and a really pleasant white musky dry down. It's not too intense. It's a beautiful sweetened white floral. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about was something that I'm pleased to say I might be breaking for many people who read Fragrantica, partially because we haven't uploaded it to the database yet, but by the time you see this podcast, it will be. The scent is called Amitis, Amitis. It's from a very, very good but very unknown house called Naxos Apothecary, Naxos. And Naxos Apothecary happens to be the sister brand from the skincare brand Korres, Korres. They're a Greek skincare brand who also has some fragrances that are, I don't want to say they're popular, but they're well known, and I think they could gain some popularity if more people check them out. The Korres brand fragrances are all very inexpensive and very approachable and very friendly on the skin. I think you can get a bottle of them for, I believe 50 ml for about 40 something dollars, maybe $50 at most. And they have sales throughout the year too. So they're a very approachable brand, but their sister brand, Naxos Apothecary, sells two things and two things only. They sell fine fragrances that come in bottles like this, that the typeface on them kind of reminds me of a zhuzhed up Le Labo. And you know, they make really good fine fragrances, slightly higher price point than the Korres, but not overwhelmingly so. And they make tea blends of all things. And what's really cool is if you go to New York City, to Manhattan for Korres's shop, which I recommend anybody do. They make really good skincare products. I like them a lot. And thank you to Nearly Noseblind who turned me onto them. If you go across the street from the Korres location in Manhattan, you can find the Naxos Apothecary shop. And that's probably the most direct way to sample their work right now if you live in the US. Again, they're based in Greece, so I imagine if you go to the Greece website, you'll probably be able to find some samples that way. Maybe they have some shops in Greece. But in the US, I would recommend either calling the shop in Manhattan to send you some samples, or if you can make it to Manhattan in person, definitely visit the shop. Really cool place to fragrance sample. Really interesting vibes they got going on in that store. But Amitis, listen, I'm just going to say the notes: pear, spearmint, orange flower, rosemary, sea foam, sandalwood. What doesn't sound lovely about that? I mean, if you don't like mint, then admittedly
nice.
The top is kind of minty, but it is the camphoraceous elements of mint are kind of tamed by a very nice semi-sweet pear note. And it's just a delightful wear. The dry down, I sprayed this a few hours ago, is like a softened woodiness, probably their version of a sandalwood accord, and just sort of a marine quality, but without any of the harsher, seashore seaweed smells. Nothing like that. Easy wearing, easy going, relaxed, breezy. What more do you want from a summer scent, honestly? And it's great stuff. I recommend checking out that brand quite a bit. I have talked ad nauseum about summer scents. We all have, and I am really excited to talk more about these things in the comments. I really want to hear anything that our audience has to share. Do any of you have any other things to throw out there for this subcategory?
This has been a fascinating look at the non-citrus world, which when I say that, it sounds sort of like, I don't know, what is it like? the world that doesn't have magnetic poles or something. I don't know, like a kind of, is there a non-citric world or, whatever. But so, um, no, I think this is interesting. I also found that I feel that this opens up a lot of conversations where, like, we, isn't it because citrus plays a specific role of being a top note, and we sort of expect it to do a certain thing. When we say, well, let's remove something from our palette and focus on it, like, that's an interesting way to approach. It's another vector into fragrance, isn't it? Where we say, let's not look at this one thing, and it sort of puts more importance on all these other things, right? It's kind of an interesting approach to perfume. And I'm intrigued by the possibilities that are brought up by that very much. So the choices have been great. You've both given me things that I want to smell more, and this is excellent.